pioneers used to entertain themselves by telling each other scary stories. At night they might gather at somebody's cabin or around a fire and see who could scare the others the most. Some boys and girls in my town do the same thing today. They get together at somebody's house, turn out the lights, eat popcorn, and then scare each other half to death. Telling scary stories is something people have done for thousands of years. Some of these tales are very old and told around the world, and most have the same origins. They're all based on things that people saw or heard or experienced or thought they did. There are a great many scary stories to tell. There are tales of ghosts, witches, devils, boogeymen, zombies, vampires. There are tales of monstrous creatures and other dangers. There are tales of things that happen daily, things that
I've got you.
We experience more often than we may think. The dark. The dark scares us. We don't know what's waiting in the dark. Sound of leaves crunching, branches groaning, or someone whispering makes us uneasy. So do strange figures we think we see in the shadows. A human, maybe, or a big animal, or something horrible we can barely make out. Throughout my years, I've heard countless tales that have kept me up at night, and I cannot recall them all, but I certainly remember the scariest of them all. I can tell you a few if you'd like, but it won't be my fault you can't get any sleep tonight. These stories, they'll make your skin begin to creep. You'll get a shivery, shaky, screamy feeling. You imagine hearing and seeing things. You hold on to your breath as you wait to find out how it all ends, and it may end very soon. We'll start with one of my favorite classics, one of a young man and his wife.
Me and my husband were on a trip to visit his mother. Usually we would arrive in time for supper, but we'd got a late start. Now it's getting dark. We decided to look for a place to stay overnight and go in the morning. Just off the road, we saw a small house in the woods. I said to my husband, maybe they rent rooms. So we stopped to ask. An elderly woman and an elderly man came to the door. They told us they didn't rent rooms, but they would have been glad to have us stay overnight as their guests. They had plenty of room, and they would enjoy the company. The woman offered to make us some coffee. She brought out some cake, and the four of us talked for a while. Then we were taken to our room. We explained we wanted to pay for this. The old man said he wouldn't take our money. And we got up early the next morning before the hosts woke up, and there was a table next to the door. And on that table we put an envelope of money, thanking them for all of their kindness. We stopped in a restaurant and had breakfast. When we told the owner where we stayed, they were shocked. They told us it was impossible. That home burned down with the owners years ago. Me and my husband, we were in we couldn't believe it, and we went back to the house. We went back to the house, and there was no house. All we found was a burned out shell. We stood there, just stood there, me and my husband, staring at the ruins, trying to understand what had happened. I screamed. Looking in the rubble, there was a badly burned table, like the one we saw at the front door. And on that table was the envelope we left in the morning.
I am an old woman, all skin and bone, who lived near the graveyard all alone. I thought I'd go to church one day to hear the parson preach and pray. But as I got to the church house style, I thought I'd stop and rest a while. But as I got to the church house door, I thought I'd stop and rest some more. But as I stopped and looked around, I saw a corpse upon the ground. From its nose down to its chin, the worms crawled out and the worms crawled in. So I to the preacher said, "Will I look like that when I am dead?" And the preacher to myself then said, "You will look like that when you are dead."
My uncle and I were walking down a lonely dirt road one day, and we came across a man who was also walking down that road. And the man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man, and the man was scared of my uncle, and my uncle was scared of the man, and we kept on walking, and it got darker, and the man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man, and the man was very scared of my uncle, and my uncle was very scared of that man, but we kept on walking, and we came to a big woods, and it was getting darker, and the man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man, and the man was very scared of my uncle, and my uncle was very scared of that man, but we kept on walking, and deeper into the woods we got, and the man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man, and the man was terribly scared of my uncle, and my uncle was terribly scared of...
Oh, hi. I'm Ruth. I have no idea who these people are or why they won't let me die in peace. I had a family once, a loving wife, 2 wonderful sons. They're gone now. All that we lived through together disappeared so quickly. My wedding, all of our trips and vacations, and baseball and basketball games, and tournaments, and graduation. All of that is nothing more than a distant memory now. These people came and took me from my home and locked me away in this room. And I begged them to let me leave this hellish place to go home to see my family again. All the heartless bastards do is shake their heads and offering me insincere platitudes before shoving more needles into my veins. They don't tell me what's going on. They just talk amongst themselves and poke and prod at the husk of what was once a woman. I give anything to see my wife again, to kiss her one last time, for the poison these monsters pump into me finally finish the job. old crone is the worst part. She hovers over me incessantly, and she refuses to answer me when I demand to know who she is and what she wants from me. She simply just holds my liver-spotted hands into hers and cries. Hi, I'm Ruth.
Many times, fear comes not so much from the idea of dying, but more from the thought of having to continue living. Much like my dear friend Ruth. I'm sure you've heard this before, but you do know we're all going to end up the same way, right? Don't ever laugh as the hearse goes by, for you may be the next to die. They wrap you up in a big white sheet, from your head down to your feet. They put you in a big black box and cover you up with dirt and rocks. All goes well for about a week. Then your coffin begins to leak. Worms crawl in, worms crawl out. The worms play solitaire on your snout. Big green worm, rolling eyes, crawls in your stomach and out your eyes. Your stomach turns a slimy green and pus pours out like whipping cream. You spread it on a slice of bread, and that's what you eat when you are dead. Here are two stories I remember vividly. Real stories of dangerous people that have yet to be identified. Do you recognize them? Maybe they're sitting next to you right now. These people are searched for daily and continue to live their lives without a care. They see no empathy, no compassion. Pair that with any past traumas, violent tendencies, or mental illness, and you get one of these stories. Here are some examples.
I hate it when my little brother Charlie has to go away. I mean, my parents constantly try to explain to me how sick he is, that I'm lucky for having a brain where all the chemicals flow properly like undammed rivers. When I complain about how bored I am without a little brother to play with, they try to make me feel bad, pointing out that his boredom likely far surpasses mine, considering he's confined to a dark room in an institution. I always beg for them to give him one last chance, and of course they did, at first. Charlie's been back home several times, each shorter in duration than the last, and every time, without fail, it all starts again. The neighborhood cats with their eyes gouged out showing up in his toy chest. My dad's razors found on the baby slide at the park across the street. Mom's vitamins replaced by bits of dishwasher tablets. My parents are hesitant now, using last chances sparingly. They say his disorder makes him charming, makes it easy for him to fake normalcy, and to trick the doctors who take care of him into thinking he's ready for rehabilitation. They tell me I'll just have to put up with my boredom if it means staying safe from him. I hate it when Charlie goes away. It makes me have to pretend to be normal until he gets back.
The date is August 13th, 2017. This is journal entry number 4. I was home, alone, cooking dinner, doing the dishes, taking out the trash. I was watching the news when I heard about the profile of a murderer on the loose. A white male, 5'7", brown hair, brown eyes, a series of tattoos running down his left arm. That was when I opened my sliding glass window and I saw a man standing in my backyard in the snow, in blood-soaked clothes. And he fit the profile of the murderer exactly. White male, 5'7", brown hair, brown eyes, series of tattoos running down his left arm. It was crazy. He was just standing there, staring at me. I started freaking out, but between the two of us was my phone. I inched closer to it. I picked it up, and I called 911.
911? What is your emergency?
I looked back at the window as I heard it was ringing, and I saw he was much closer to me now. I dropped the phone as I realized there were no footprints in the snow.
Sometimes the most frightening things in life are not the things that happen to you, but to the people around you, loved ones. And no one experiences this fear quite like parents. Only parents can truly understand the terror of feeling helpless in protecting their child. I mean, when your entire life is devoted to loving and protecting this one thing, what happens when you aren't able to?
I was pregnant with Sarah when I first prayed that she'd take away my pain. I was sick of the beatings and the cursing and the tormenting. My husband was not a very nice man. Knowing that I'd soon be a mother was the wake-up call I needed. I left, packed my bags while he was out, bought a bus ticket, and disappeared. I prayed to God that Sarah would take away my pain, that the beginning of her life would also mark the re-beginning of mine. What I didn't expect was for God to take my request quite so literally. It was only when she was just over a year old that I figured it out. Sarah was sitting on her high chair watching Mommy cook. I was cutting up vegetables for dinner when suddenly the knife slipped, slicing open the tip of my finger. I swore, rushing to grab a kitchen towel when suddenly the pain vanished. I stared at my finger as the wound sealed, leaving a perfect little white scar. Suddenly, Sarah screamed, and I ran over to her and watched in horror as blood started to spill from a slice that slowly cut across her little finger. And from that day onward, my safety was no longer my own, but Sarah's too. She took my pain, and we shared the same scars. One on the tip of our finger, one on our knee, one on the underside of our chin, and one on the left side of our foot. All of my scars were now hers.
except for one. I was called into her kindergarten over a year ago. Sarah had injured herself on the playground and they'd taken her to the emergency room. They told me I wasn't to worry. It was a simple gash, but it probably needed a few stitches. That scar was her favorite. In the shape of a little star on her forearm. It was the only scar we didn't share. Our lives weren't perfect, but we were happy. Until he tracked us down. I knew it was him from the way he knocked on our door. That pounding held a familiar anger, a tension that could only be created by him. I pushed Sarah into her room and told her to lock the door. I ran to the kitchen and pulled out a knife from the drawer. Just as he kicked down the door, shouting and raving, he leapt for me. He put his hands around my throat, and it wasn't just fear for my life that made me lash out with the knife. It was for Sarah's life too. His choking hands would not just end my life, but hers too. I buried the knife up to the hilt in his chest. There was hardly any blood. And without a sound, he dropped to the floor. I knelt down shakily, feeling for a pulse at his arm. There was none. It was then that I noticed a small scar on his forearm. It was in the shape of a star. I guess God decided that Sarah should take both of our pain.
I had just fallen asleep when I heard a strange voice. Ellen. It whispered my name. It didn't sound like my dad, or my grandfather, or any voice I'd heard before. I'm coming up the stairs. I'm on the first step. Now I'm on the second step. I could hear the voice coming closer and closer. He wasn't kidding. He was definitely getting closer. I was scared. Terrified doesn't even begin to describe the way I felt. I yelled for my parents, but they didn't hear me, and they didn't come. How did they not hear? They heard me scream every time I had a nightmare. Every time. This time it wasn't a nightmare, and I was yelling louder than I ever have. They didn't hear me. No one heard me. Then the voice whispered, Ellen, I'm on the top step. Now I'm in the hall. Now I'm outside your room. Then it whispered, I'm standing right next to your bed. It was quieter than everything else the voice had said, but I could just tell he was right next to me. The breath of his voice struck my ear and warmed it up as he yelled, I've got you! I screamed and the voice stopped. My father rushed into the room and turned on the light. Someone's in here, I yelled, and they looked and looked while I laid on the bed panting with fear. Nobody was there. But that doesn't explain the handprint on my shoulder from when it grabbed me.
There was a man who lived in Leeds. He filled his garden snow. But when the snow began to melt, it was like a ship without a boat. And when the ship began to sail, it was like a bird without a tail. And when the bird began to fly, it was like an eagle in the sky. And when the sky began to roar, it was like a lion at my door. And when the door began to crack, it was like a penknife in my back. And when my back began to bleed, I was dead, dead, dead indeed.
There are countless tales out there to send a shiver down your spine, but only a few truly encompass the feeling of fear. It's all we've been talking about: fear, fear, fear. Why so much talk of fright? Here's why. Some boys and girls were at a party one night. There was a graveyard down the street, and they were talking about how scary it was. "Don't ever stand on a grave after dark," one of the boys said. "The person inside will grab you. He'll pull you under." "That's not true," one of the girls said. "It's just superstition." "I'll give you $1 if you go stand on the grave," the boy said. "I'm not scared of a grave," the girl said. "I'll go do it right now." The boy handed her his knife. "Stick this in the grave where you stand, then we'll know you were there." The graveyard was filled with shadows and was quiet as death. "There's nothing to be scared of," the girl told herself, but she was scared anyways. She picked out a grave and stood on it. Then she quickly bent over and plunged the knife into the soil, and she started to leave, but she couldn't. Something was holding her back. She tried a second time to leave, and she couldn't move. She was filled with terror. "Something has got me!" she screamed, and she fell to the ground. When she didn't come back, the others went to look for her. They found her body sprawled across the grave. Without realizing it, she had plunged the knife through her skirt and into the ground. It was only the knife that held her. She had died of fright. Surely the person in the grave wasn't going to pull her down there with them. That corpse is resting peacefully. But our minds are more powerful than we think. Sure, fear can be fun, but is it worth the risk? What's the point in being scared if you know it can kill you? Many things we fear are only figments of our imagination. Look into the mirror for a minute. No talking, no gimmicks. Just look into your eyes and don't blink. What do you see? You may not even want to know. Things that can kill you are considered to be powerful, right? I find that interesting, considering the human imagination may be one of the most powerful things out there. Remember to stay weary in the night, for your nightmares may be too frightening for you to wake. See you there.